Hi all, this is the 25 mark essay response for Business A-Level AQA, the 25 mark question that I set you in the last couple of days. So this is just a recorded, narrated PowerPoint which hopefully will help you to answer the question. Okay, so first and foremost, let's take a look at what the question was. To what extent is marketing research an essential investment when developing and launching a new product? And I've walked you through the sort of approach that you could use using the Tutor2U examples that you will have looked at on Google Classroom via the links that I've put in place for you. So first and foremost, obviously we've got to read the question and look for any command words in the question. Very important step this, okay? So in this case, where we've got the term to what extent, it's clearly going to mean that to some degree we're going to have to give a balanced response to the question. We're going to have to weigh up both sides of the two paragraphs, the two arguments we're going to put together, and whether the argument is that marketing research is an essential investment or not. And to some degree, there is going to have to be some consideration and some balance involved in this, okay? So first things first then, thinking about the things that you could also cover here. If we're talking about this balanced response, we've got to weigh up both sides of the argument and make sure that we understand that there are always two sides to an argument, but the content hooks that we're looking for specifically are marketing research and clearly in this case the other elements of the marketing mix, the 7 Ps that are truly essential when you're having to develop and launch a new product. So marketing research by itself isn't going to guarantee, it can help definitely as we'll see, but it's not going to guarantee the success of the new product launch. The other thing to bear in mind is the evaluation hooks that you can consider as well, and that's pretty much what we just described really, in that marketing research should do a couple of things. One, it will make sure that you're producing the right type of product if you've found out what your customers want, which is obviously a part of the whole marketing process, understanding your customer needs and satisfying them better than anybody else. But it's not going to be the only thing that will decide the success or otherwise of a new product launch. So that's your first step. Let's have a look at developing paragraph 1 then. And in this case, we're going to look at the point explained, the PCAN process. The first point explained is that marketing research is an essential investment. So is it? And we're going to try and explain why we think it is. And there are a couple of reasons for that. Okay, one, obviously it allows us to understand our customer wants and needs better. And if we're developing a product that meets our needs better, then chances are we're going to hopefully be successful in terms of the product suiting the market as well as you can ensure that. However, one of the things that we also need to think about is giving some examples, and we've talked in the past about the ASOS being a really good example of how they use market research to get a competitive advantage. So bringing in an example clearly would be a good instance to do this here. Some of the models and theories and reasoning that we could include too. We talked about competitive advantage and what that means. And obviously, if we're doing things like primary research, where you're actually commissioning it yourself and you're the only person or only company to have the insight into that, that clearly is going to give you a competitive advantage because you're going to have some information that others do not have access to. And then we can also talk about the different types of research and the information that they provide. So you could talk about qualitative and quantitative and uses of primary and secondary research. There's a whole range of things that we could talk about to demonstrate your understanding of the research process. Could talk about the different types of activity you can do to research too. So there are some models and theory, some theory and reasoning that you can use to develop your first paragraph there, okay? In terms of evaluating paragraph 1 then, because essentially for a 25 marker we're going to need to evaluate and also conclude. The evaluation point really, right at the outset when we first read the question, is that yes, research is a useful tool. because it allows you to find out what customers want, but it doesn't mean by itself that that's going to guarantee a successful launch of a new product. It's just one element that needs to be considered, and that's a common theme throughout this presentation, essentially, that it's not the only reason for success. Let's look at developing paragraph 2 then. In this instance, again, going back to the point explained, and then trying to give some context, so essentially pecan again. In essence, what we're saying is that in the first paragraph point we made that it was obviously an important element. Marketing research was an important element, but in this instance, what we're trying to do is give a balance and say that essentially when we're talking about developing and launching a new product, then essentially we've got to look at all the elements of the marketing mix, and that obviously allows you to bring in models and theories and also give some reasoning, okay? So to try and give some balance and almost give this counter argument, we can again refer back to the fact that research is important. It's important to understand our customers better, but there are a whole range of other factors that we need to consider when it comes to successfully developing the launch of a product. Well, in this instance, we've got obviously any of the 7 Ps that we can include, but I think in terms of demonstrating that you understand how that might work, you could talk about maybe 1 or 2. So promotion, for instance, it's all very good if you've got done some research, but if you're not very good at promoting your product or service, then that clearly is going to have an impact on the success or otherwise of your launch, okay? Some of the models and theories and reasoning behind that, then we can talk about the 7 Ps. You can bring in the fact that you understand that to have a successful product launch, you've got to consider all of the 7 Ps. So product, price, promotion, place, processes, people, and physical environment. In this instance, you wouldn't need to explain absolutely every element of that, but clearly demonstrating that you understand that integrating all of those different elements together is really how you're going to make sure that your product is going to be successfully launched. You could also think about, in this instance, it's not just the internal factors that we've got to bear in mind, but it's also the external factors that may influence a successful launch. So we can bring in PESTLE. Again, wouldn't need to include absolutely all of them, but showing that you understand that external factors are things that a business has absolutely no control over is clearly going to demonstrate that you've thought this through and you've taken a wider view on things, which is exactly what you've got to do for a 25-mark question. Also, competition, very important. We talk about PESTLE and often include competition within that, but you can actually talk specifically about competition. How strong are they? Are they a market leader? Are they going to retaliate if you start to bring in a new product that's going to then affect their business? In some cases, clearly that is going to be the case. And in very, very competitive markets like technology, for instance, if you want to launch a new product, you've got to be very big, very strong, and have very deep pockets and make some significant investment to knock your competitors off their perch, so to speak. The other thing that you can bring in there is AIDA, which is a communications model: attention, interest, desire, action. And again, it's all about when you're launching a product, particularly if it's a new product, you've got to get customers' attention, you've got to get them interested, you've got to get them desiring the product, and then finally you've got to get them taking action, i.e. buying your product or service. There's another communications model and theory that you can actually bring in there. Okay, if we're going to evaluate paragraph 2 then, and I think it's very important that we sort of balance the fact that we understand that research is an important tool, a useful tool for our customers to find out more about our customers, but understanding the dynamics of the market that you're trying to enter and the influences that will affect success are clearly going to be very important. So thinking about external factors that, again, we talked about before, the PESTLE external factors. The fact is that the business or a company has very little control over that, and that is a nice way to sort of evaluate as you're going along, essentially, and finish off paragraph 2. Okay, conclusion then. For a 25 marker, it's important that you make your 2 points. You give a balanced argument, so you give a view as to to what extent in this case marketing research is a very important investment, but in this instance we're going to also need to conclude. Okay, now there are two options. We can either use the AGIM option, which we talked about and you've seen on Tutor to You, which is basically answering the question, justifying your answer, thinking about things that the answer might depend on, and then the most important reason to sort of sum up and conclude your overall conclusion. However, if you're happier using the DIPs that we talked about often in class, they are very similar. You haven't got to use both. You can use one or other, whichever you feel most comfortable with. But it's important that you're using this type of language. So again, the solution, the answer we talked about, depends on a number of things. The most important point is this, and obviously some of the external factors, PESEL and competition, are clearly going to have an impact on the overall decision-making process here. We can also look at the short-term and long-term implications of what we talked about, and then give a solution to the question. So again, you don't need to do all of those. You can either go down the answer route, so the answer justified, depends, and most important reason, or you can use DIPs. And it's really about making sure you're asking yourself those types of questions and answering those types of questions in your conclusion to really give a wide view as to your understanding of the particular problem. And what I've done on the next slide, as we'll see in a minute, is just use the AGIM answer, justify, it depends, and most important reason to flesh out, in this case, how you might conclude the answer. Okay. So let's have a look at the first part then, the answer. Well, marketing research is an important investment when developing and launching a new product, but it's not the only factor that's going to determine success. So that is essentially answering the question. It's saying that yes, it's important. However, it's not the only factor that's going to determine success. We can justify that by saying that essentially the 7 Ps should all be considered, and we should look at this integrated approach where we're looking at the product, price, promotion, place, process, people, physical environment, all of those to try to make sure that we're getting the right product at the right price, sold in all the right places, and using the correct promotion. I think we've got an ice cream van going on in the background, so if you heard that, I do apologise. And finally, two more. It depends on the following things. So successful launches are going to depend on a number of external factors that the company has absolutely no control over, like, for instance, the economic environment. If we're in a boom or in a recession, and clearly here's an example, we're in the midst of a recession caused by the pandemic at the moment, that clearly is going to have an impact on the success or otherwise of the product and service that you're operating in. Or you're choosing to operate in and trying to influence and gain a foothold in the market. Clearly, the level of competition is also going to have a fundamental effect on how successful your launch is going to be, and the sorts of competitor activity and how they might retaliate in terms of how they might try and price you out the market, or they might try and launch their own new product. All those things can have an effect on, in this case, the successful launch of a product or service. A most important reason, though, to sort of sum up essentially what we've just talked about again, and it's not really repeating it, it's just saying that in this instance, an understanding, and this is quite a good evaluative conclusion, no product is guaranteed a successful product launch. But in this instance, if you invest in a coordinated and integrated marketing campaign using all of the 7 Ps, then this is going to be more likely. And that is the sort of plan that I would suggest that you use to actually answer this particular question. Okay. Obviously, if you have any questions, or I'm going to put this on YouTube so that you can access it after we've had our live lesson to talk about this. But again, any questions on this, and think about the process, and the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. The more you practice these things, the better you're going to get at it. Okay, so thanks for listening, and I'll catch up soon.